Hey, Jenny.
I'm on class. Hey.
Do I have you for English too this period?
Yeah.
I got you back to back. Okay, cool. All right. Recording. There we go. All right. So again, our one more question is in the chat. What's the difference between fiction and nonfiction? Who can help us out with that today? Again, you can reply in the chat or you can come off mute and answer out loud, whatever is easiest.
Sorry, Mr. V. May you say the question one more time?
Sure, it's in the chat as well if you can see. But what is the difference between fiction and nonfiction?
Is nonfiction real and fiction is fake?
I don't know. Is it?
I think it's the other way around.
Are you sure?
Yeah, I said it. Nonfiction is real and
Yeah.
fiction is fake.
Yeah, you're real. You're right. Good job. And Johnny said the same thing. Nonfiction
I
is
said
real.
it.
Happen in real life.
That's the truth, man.
Fiction can't.
You
Yes,
learn
thank
in
you, Diana.
English.
Thank you, Johnny.
V.
Who's that? Is that
It's Steve. Yeah, the rooming code not working for me.
No, you're in there. I got you already.
All right.
Yeah, you're good. Thank you, though. So, yes, fiction is fake. Right? That's how I always remember it because it's 2 F's, right? Nonfiction is real based on fact. It's really good job. So here is my next question.
It's like based on a true story, right?
Exactly, right? So now here's my next question. What do you think? What do you think creative nonfiction means? So if we know nonfiction is real and it's based on true story or facts or it happened in real life, what do we think creative nonfiction means? So if you're stumped on this, think about what
You said who do we think created them?
Like, no, what do you think? So what do you think creative nonfiction means? Because we already know what nonfiction is because we talked about that just a second ago. Now my next question
I think what made that create it was basically give us. I can explain it.
So
think about
it this way.
Facts and life and stuff like that.
Okay, think about it this
way. That's what I feel like.
If you hear
and nonfiction is what they want us to believe. Well, fiction is what they want us to believe. Non-fictional is telling us what we should believe, and fictional is what they want us to believe. That's how I feel.
Okay, that works. So now here's my next question. Think about it this way. If you heard the term creative nonfiction, what would you think of? Because when we think of nonfiction, usually we think of like maybe
I feel like creative nonfiction is basically telling real facts but fake facts at the same time.
Okay. Is another way to think about it maybe like we're taking the real facts, but we're putting it into like a story that might be like kind of partly made up or something like that? Is that kind of what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that is a fairly good definition. And that's what we're going to talk about today, because that's what this whole project is centered around. So if you've ever seen, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, but if you've ever seen like a movie that's based on a true story, right? That's creative nonfiction, because you're taking that nonfiction, basis, that person in real life or those events that actually happen or whatever it is, but you're presenting it in a creative way through a movie, through a story, something like that. So that's what we mean when we say creative nonfiction. Okay. So that's kind of going to be what we are looking at today. All right. So ladies and gents, what I would like you to do is, and if you put the code in on Summit, refresh your page once or twice if you're not seeing the kind of class show up, and then you should be okay. But if you have logged in on Summit and you have our class pulled up, again, English 4, term 4, creative nonfiction, you should see checkpoint 1 assigned to you right here that says creative nonfiction intro. Okay. And then if you click in the box right here, you should pull up a document that looks like this. Okay. Please pull that up now. And when you have it pulled up, when your screen looks like mine, give me a thumbs up in the chat. Now, Nayana, I know you said you're having technical difficulties, so if you're unable to pull up the checkpoint on your phone, that's totally fine. Like I said, we are recording, so it'll be up on the YouTube page, and you can always follow along and work on it at a later time. But if you are able to pull it up on your phone,
So wait. You say you're recording this, so this gonna be on YouTube of us talking and stuff?
but it's not like it's a private, because if people miss class, they can
All
go
right,
back.
well, y'all can subscribe to my channel, Life of Nick and Yanni, since we're gonna be doing YouTube.
All right, well, now we know. Yeah. Okay, so one more time, finding checkpoint 1 on Summit under our class, Creative Nonfiction, and then clicking the link in the box, and then it'll bring you to this doc right here, okay? So again, when you have that pulled up on Summit, when your screen looks like mine, please let me know by giving me a thumbs up, telling me that you got it in the chat, all right? I believe we are all assigned to the project now, so everybody should be able to access this on Summit. If you're not seeing the checkpoint yet, just refresh your page once or twice, and then it should come up. I'll give everybody about another minute or so to pull this up on Summit if you don't have it yet. And again, if you do have it or when you get it pulled up, please let me know in chat so that I know everybody has it. You can give me a thumbs up, give me a yes, whatever works.
Yo, V,
What's up, Fabe?
this due today because my computer about to die and I can't find my charger.
We're gonna kind of work through it, but we're gonna kind of like, this is the whole checkpoint, but we're gonna kind of work on it in stages. So we're gonna try and tackle this first part today. But if your computer ends up dying and you don't get it finished, you can always go back and work on it later. All right.
Okay, so just like I told Miss Francois,
Mm-hmm.
since my computer down right now, I'm gonna try to get it done all by the day you on her project, which is your checkpoints. I'm
No
gonna try to
worries.
get it done by the day. Is that okay with you?
That is totally fine. Yeah, nothing like, again, we're just starting, so nothing with a super hard due date just yet. Okay. So does everybody have this pulled up? I didn't see anything in the chat, but I'm gonna assume everybody's got it pulled up. Everybody's good. Yes. Oh, that's Fabe's computer, probably not. Cool. All right. Gianni and Mira, you guys got this pulled up. You're good.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So then, as you can see, the checkpoint is called Creative Nonfiction Intro, right? So how we're going to do this checkpoint is basically in kind of 3 different stations. So you can see the first one says, what is creative nonfiction? And then the second one says, I am from poem. And then the last station is 6-word memoirs, right? So we're going to kind of work on this in phases throughout this week and next week. And then you're going to kind of complete this as we go. And then once you have the whole thing finished, you'll submit it, and that'll be checkpoint 1. So we're going to try and tackle the first part today, which is this what is creative nonfiction station. So what I'm going to do, ladies and gents, is I have a little PowerPoint slideshow I'm going to go through right now. And as I'm going through, what I want you to be doing is paying attention, following along, and then we'll stop at certain points where you can fill in the answers to these questions in complete sentences, right? So you can see the first one says, what is creative nonfiction? So when we get to that spot in the PowerPoint, we'll stop and you can fill that in, on your checkpoint. And then we'll continue as we go with the rest of them. All right. Make sense? Any questions? Cool. All right. So I'm going to be sharing my screen with the PowerPoint. All right. So if you have the Zoom chat pulled up, you'll see my screen share with the PowerPoint. But as you're filling stuff out, you can go to the your Summit tab and fill in the checkpoint. All right. So you're kind of going to be working out of two tabs here. All right. So I'm going to get my screen share going again and we will dive into it. All right. So what is creative nonfiction? We already kind of talked about this a little bit in our do now question, right? But creative nonfiction, it is not a list of facts, dates, and events, but rather the story of a person who lived through those facts, dates, and events, all right? So right there, we have a definition, right? So what you can do on your checkpoint is fill in that definition right here, okay? So what is creative nonfiction, right? It is not a list of dates, facts, dates, and events, but rather the story of a person who lived through those facts, dates, and events. So I would type that right into my checkpoint. It is not a list of facts, dates, and events.
Mr. V,
What's up?
may I ask you a question?
Absolutely.
You send me all what I have to do to my email so I can make sure I'm doing correctly?
Yes, I can do that. That's no problem.
Thank you so much. This is unique.
It's not list, but rather, and then we'll go back to our definition. The story of a person who lived through those facts, dates, and events. Through those facts, dates, and events. Okay. So again, as we go through the PowerPoint and we get to certain spots, we'll stop and you can fill in that information on your checkpoint. So I'm going to put the slide back up and leave this up here for a minute. And what you should all be doing is filling in this definition or typing in this definition next to that first question on checkpoint 1. And as you're typing that in, just a little bit more about this, as you can see here, writing your own creative nonfiction will allow you to learn and experiment with postmodern conventions in writing, explore and expand the scope of an essay, work with your own lived experiences, meaning stuff that we have experienced ourselves and lived through, experience and practice the value of reflection, because we're reflecting on those experiences to write a creative nonfiction piece, connect your life to the time period you live in, and grapple with the natural problems and questions about truth and memory. So I'll give you guys about another 30 seconds or so to get this definition copied into your checkpoint. And again, you're putting it right here in the same spot that I did in my example. Okay. And again, if you are not able to access Summit right now, like if you're having technical difficulties or anything like that, you can be following along. You can screenshot stuff. And like I said, this class recording will be up on the Yes Philly YouTube page later today. All right, how are we doing this? Does everybody have this copied into their checkpoint? Can I jump to the next slide? Do we need a little bit more time? If I don't hear anything, I'm going to assume we're good. Awesome. All right. So now here is the answer to your second question in that checkpoint in the first box. Right? How can something be both creative and nonfiction at the same time? Right? Because this is kind of what we already answered. We know nonfiction equals writing based on facts, real people, and events, and fiction equals writing that is creative, imaginative, and made up. So how can nonfiction be creative? It is a hybrid of nonfiction and literature. When something is a hybrid of something, what does that mean? This bold word here, that's
I'm not quite sure. May you define it?
like when something is a hybrid, what does that mean? What are we talking about?
It's a mix of two different things.
Right, Jenny, it's a mix of two things. So think about like hybrid cars, right? They run on gas and electric, okay? Hybrid animals are two species that we kind of put together, right? So creative nonfiction is a mix of those two things. It's a hybrid of nonfiction, meaning the facts, right? Facts, real people, real events, and literature, which is fiction. So stuff that's creative, imaginative, made up, okay? So we put them both together to get
Yes, you do.
creative nonfiction is a type of writing that is factual and
I'll put you on.
artistically written. Remember to mute yourself if you are not speaking, please.
I
Thank you.
agree.
So by combining the two of those,
Which one? He got a couple.
by combining the two of those, we get creative nonfiction. So we tell a true story in an engaging way. So again, think about movies based on true stories, you know, biopics, stuff like that. All right. They're telling a true factual story, but they're doing it in an artistic way, right? That's engaging rather than just, you know, being like a Wikipedia article where like, here's the facts about this person. Okay. So again, as we continue through here and you're filling out your checkpoint, you can do this one. If you want to do it in bullet points, you can do it that way. So how can nonfiction be creative? And then we go back to the checkpoint. It's a hybrid of nonfiction and literature. So I would type that in there. All right, what else? Creative nonfiction is a type of writing that is factually true and artistically written. So I could type that part, factually true, artistically written. And then I could type the last one. The genre tells us true story in an engaging way. capitalize those two in an engaging way. Okay, so now I have my second question answered here. Check my one. So again, I'll leave this up for another minute or two and give you guys some time to copy that into your checkpoint. So you're answering the second question in that first box in checkpoint 1 with this information right here. All right, how are we doing? We're getting this copied down. Does anybody need any more time? Can we keep going here? Get. If I hear silence, I want to assume we're good to go. So we'll jump to the next one. All right. So what makes something artistically written when we're talking about this part right here? So kind of the literature side of this. What makes something artistically written? Okay. These literary devices. So stuff like having themes and imagery, figurative language, tone, mood, setting, characters, plot, motifs, illusion. All these different things are what makes something artistically written. Okay. So when we go through some of the stuff we're going to read and look at in this project, we're going to be looking at these specific things, these literary devices. All right. And, think about movies or stories that you've seen or read that are, based on true events. They also have a lot of this stuff in there. So this is where we get the literature part of that hybrid, right? Of nonfiction and literature. So we're looking at some of these, right? And some of these should ring some bells like you've heard before, like figurative language, theme, imagery. Some probably not, but that's okay because we're going to talk about them, right? So when you're looking at that third question in your checkpoint and it's asking, what are the features of the genre of creative nonfiction? This is a really good example of that because it's comparing the two. So creative nonfiction versus traditional nonfiction. So like we said, in creative nonfiction, we use literary devices to make the story engaging and artistic, right? It's written narrative structures and some personal reflections woven in. For example, traditional narrative, braided frame, collage. So these are all just ways we can tell a story, right? And then it's written with a deeply personal perspective and voice through the eyes of the writer versus traditional nonfiction. So if you're looking at like a news article or an encyclopedia or a Wikipedia page, it sticks to the facts and writes with an informative tone, right? So think about, okay, when I read something on Wikipedia, does it read or feel the same way like I do when I read a book or a story? Obviously not, right? Because it's written from that informative tone. So that's the difference they're talking about. It's written with complex non-narrative text structures. For example, compare, contrast, problem and solution, cause and effect, right? So in other words, if you're reading a news article and it's saying, this species of bird is dying because there was a chemical spill in this ocean, that's the cause and effect part. It's giving you the facts, right? And it rarely allows the narrator to have a personal perspective or voice, written with journalistic no nonsense style. So it's very kind of straight ahead, right? And then both of these, though, use well-researched accounts of real events and experiences. So again, in creative nonfiction, we have, the true part of it, the actual facts, but they're presented in a more of an artistic, creative way. Okay. So again, what are some of the key elements of creative nonfiction? We have them right here. All right. Flexibility of form, which means you can write it in a bunch of different kind of ways. You can make it an essay, you can make it a short story, you can make it a poem, you can make it a podcast, whatever it might be. A literary approach, right? So we use literary devices like we saw in that chart. Like there's tone, there's a point of view, there's dialogue, right? It's not just giving you the facts like a Wikipedia page. There's discovery or exploration, right? So we're exploring an idea or an issue. Self-discovery or explanation of the world around us, okay? What I like to think about for this one as an example is, if you've ever seen the movie Ray with Jamie Foxx, a big part of the movie is his recovery from a heroin addiction, right? So it's giving you the facts of, like, Ray Charles in real life was addicted to heroin, but when we watch the movie, we're seeing his kind of self-discovery of that. And that's part of the creative nonfiction approach. Sorry. And then there's also a personal presence, right? The writer's voice creates an identity, right? There's a clear rhythm and style and texture. In other words, we can tell who the author is because they have a specific way of writing versus, a Wikipedia page, they all kind of look and sound the same because they're written with that, factual tone, right? So as we're filling out our checkpoint here, we're looking at the third question. Describe the major features of creative nonfiction in your own words. Here are those features, okay? So what we can do for this one, since there is a lot of them here, is we can just list them, all right? So I could do bullet points again right here. We have flexibility of form, right? And then we have literary approach. So I will write that one right here. Okay. And then discovery and exploration. I'll write that one right here. And then last but not least, personal presence, right? And so if we're trying to put these in our own words, how could we do that here? If we go back and look at our definitions, right? Flexibility of form. Creative fiction can follow any form: essay, short story, poetry, podcast, blog, etc. So this is where I need you guys to help me out. If we're trying to put these in our own words, what could we say? How could we put flexibility of form in our own words? How could we define that? What does that mean? Any thoughts on that one? If we look again at the definition here, right? Creative fiction can follow any form: essay, short story, poetry, podcast, blog, etc. Right? So now how can we put that into our own words over here? If I'm trying to describe the flexibility of form, what does that mean?
It can come in any form of writing.
Yes, good job. Thank you. We can put that one. any form of writing, essay, poem, story, etc. Okay, good. Literary approach. How can we put that in our own words? Let's go back, look at that definition. All right. Literary approach, use of literary devices like tone, point of view, dialogue, description, flashback, flash forward, etc. All right. This one, a little bit trickier. So I'll kind of give you guys my definition. So literary approach could mean it uses different literary devices like figurative language, dialogue, etc. to tell the story, right? And when we say dialogue, that should be one that sounds familiar. What does that mean? When there's dialogue in a story, what's happening?
Two people having a conversation.
Yes, people are talking. Good job, Gianni. Thank you. All right. So 2 more here, and then we just have one last one, then we're going to wrap up here. Good job today. All right. Discovery, exploration. So what does this mean? What does this mean? Let's go back, look at that definition. Creative nonfiction is all about exploring an idea or issue, self-discovery or exploration of the world around us. And again, remember, I used that example from the movie Ray. So if we're putting that in our own words, how can we sum up discovery or exploration? How can we sum up that one? What's going to happen to the character in a creative nonfiction story in terms of discovery or exploration? What are we discovering or what are we exploring? How can we sum this one up?
Are they like finding out something they didn't know before about themselves or about something else?
I think so. I think that sounds like a really great one. So characters will discover something they didn't know before about themselves or about the world around them. Really great definition. And then our last one, personal presence. We can go back and look at this definition. The writer's voice creates an identity. It's distinct. And there's a clear style with rhythm, texture, color, and pace. So last but not least, how can we sum up personal presence? What does that mean when we talk about creative nonfiction? The personal presence in creative nonfiction is coming from who?
Like how the main person portrays himself.
Not the main character. Who's writing the main character?
Oh, the narrator?
The
Or the
narrator
author?
or the author, right? Exactly. So we know the author has a distinct voice and style. Okay, really good job. So describe the major features of creative writing. So I will leave this up here for about another minute or two. If you guys want to follow along, get this copied onto your checkpoint. And so again, folks, if you have been following along all class and typing this on your checkpoint as we go, then by the time class is over, you'll already have the first part of checkpoint 1 finished. I'm gonna be on track. Now, if you're having technical difficulties or you're on your phone, something like that, like I said, we're recording, so it'll be up on the YouTube page. You can check it out later and work on it then. I'll also be in my afternoon lab office hours today as well, if you want to stop back in there. All right, so I'll leave this up for about another minute if you want to copy what I have onto yours or take a screenshot so you can copy it later. All right, awesome. Again, if you don't have it all copied down, take a screenshot real quick, or again, it'll be up on YouTube later. But we got one last one to fill in right here. So jumping back to our slides, okay? Elements of creative nonfiction, we just wrote those all down. So finally, what are some of the types and popular examples, right? So types of creative nonfiction, we could have personal essays, we could have a memoir, we could have travel writing, food writing, biographies, ethnography, a lyric essay, literary journalism, autobiographies, chronicle, diary, documentary. So this is a super popular one right now, especially if you watch Netflix. Like a lot of true crime documentaries are out there. I just watched a really good one about pirates a few weeks ago. All right, podcasts, another popular one. So if you listen to like a history podcast or a true crime podcast or anything like that, that is creative nonfiction because they're giving you those facts about the crime that happened or um, about the history that happened, or even if it's like a psychology podcast, um, they're giving you those true facts, but they're presenting them in that podcast form. And also poetry, of course, as well. So all different kinds of creative nonfiction we can have. Has anybody, have does do we have we heard of most of these or some of these before? Do we watch any like documentaries, podcasts, read any biographies, anything like that? Do any of these jump out at any of us? Feel free to share. If they do, you can put it in the chat. But like, are there any podcasts any of us listen
I'm
to?
sorry, but one for me is the O.J. Simpson trial.
Okay, that's good. Is that Nyana?
I'm answering for Unique right now.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, and then just to clarify, I have you on my roll for this class, not Unique. I just didn't know if you guys knew that too, but I just want to make sure you're on the same.
Oh yeah. Well, that's my answer. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good. You're good. But yeah, when you say the O.J. Simpson one, do you mean
Hmm?
the American Crime Story show or the actual documentary?
The one on Netflix.
Okay, yeah.
They
So
had to me because they had so much evidence against them. I understand is basically a what you say a creative
creative
nonfiction
nonfiction, right?
is was lies told in it also. So
Yeah,
just like the Bobby Brown movie, it was lies also told about Whitney Houston.
right.
So
So so we talked about it's a hybrid of nonfiction and literature, right? So that's the literature part. We can take a little bit of that creative liberty. So because that's why I asked, because there's two different ones that I'm thinking of. One is the actual O.J. Simpson trial documentary, where it's like, here's the facts, right? And then the other
Mhm.
one is the show American Crime Story, where we're taking the facts, but we're presenting them in kind of like a fictionalized reenactment of the trial, right? Where instead of like experts on giving testimony, we have like actors playing like the act, like Cuba Gooding Jr. played O.J. Simpson and David Schwimmer played um, Robert Kardashian and all that stuff. So they're still taking the facts of what happened, but they're presenting them in those artistic, those creative ways. But that's a really good example. Thank you, Nana. Any other ones that come to mind? From anybody? Podcasts we've listened to, biographies, autobiographies we've read. Anything like that. I just mentioned an example that I have was and Miss Cat, if you have any examples, feel free to share as well. But I just watched a show on Netflix a few weeks ago called The Lost Pirate Kingdom, and that was a really good one because it was a perfect example of that kind of hybrid because it had historical experts giving like the factual accounts of this is what really happened, and then it had a lot of that stuff acted out dramatically by actors that kind of looked like it was a movie, right? So it was a really good example of creative nonfiction. Miss Cat, do you have any creative nonfiction examples?
Yeah.
You've been thinking
I
lately?
sometimes listen to the podcast, I think it's called Crime Junkie, where they
Mhm.
go over a bunch of different cases um, from all over the world. And they just make it really interesting because they tell it in such an engaging way, and it kind of feels like you're listening to a TV show, and it's definitely much better for me to hear it rather than just read it. So it's easier for me to comprehend and stay paying attention to it.
Right. And so again,
May I say one more movie?
sure, go ahead.
You know the movie about the 5 boys who's convicted for
Oh,
rape?
the Central Park Five, yeah,
Yes, Central Park 5. That's a creative non-fictional story
definitely. I
to me.
forget what is.
When
Oh,
They
When
See
They See
Us.
Us? Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Is it? Yeah, yeah. I watched a little bit of that in class last year. Yeah, that's another great example. And again, that's another example of, rather than being a documentary, it's, we're going to take these facts and we're going to have it dramatically reenacted by actors.
Like they were wrong.
Like
And
shit.
they never touched that woman a day in their life.
Yeah.
And that
yeah,
man
yeah.
confessed years later.
And so remember, keep in mind when we talk about creative nonfiction, I just don't want people to get confused that when we're talking about creative nonfiction, we're not saying that they're changing the story or anything like that. That's not the creative part. What we mean is that they're just taking the nonfiction story and they're presenting it in a creative, in a more artistic way, like in a Netflix series or in a podcast.
Right,
Rather,
just like the movie Central Park 5.
right.
We
Exactly.
know it was that, but they added more to it, like dramatically.
Oh yeah, I see what you're saying now. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
Like, yeah, they were convicted. They had people against them. They even had Trump saying send them the death penalty. You get what I'm
Mhm.
saying?
Yeah.
So
Really good example.
even though they had no evidence against them boys, they
Yes.
still convicted them for it.
Very, very crazy. So to wrap up here, really good job. Thank you guys for sharing. Really good job. Here are some other kind of popular examples. And as you can see on your checkpoint, that is the last thing we have here. List some examples of creative nonfiction. Now, we already heard a couple, right? We heard When They See Us,
You think this is thick or the school?
right, which is on Netflix. Crime Junkie, which was Miss Cat's podcast.
Yeah.
We also
Yeah.
had American Crime Story, O.J. Simpson. That's also on Netflix. So those are just a couple. You guys can list as many as you can come up with there. Here's another few examples. That book, Eat, Pray, Love, which is also a movie with Julia Roberts, right? Because this was kind of like a memoir where Elizabeth Gilbert went on this trip and journey and then wrote the book about.
May I ask you a question, Mr. T?
Absolutely.
Do you believe the color purple is a non-fictional or a creative fictional or a fictional?
So I've actually never read it or seen the movie, but from what I know about it, I think that would be considered creative nonfiction because I think even though it didn't happen to the author Alice Walker herself, I think she based it on the experiences of her ancestors. And so because that actually happened to them in real life, we would call that creative nonfiction, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, but again, I don't know. I'm not the best person to ask because I haven't read the book or seen the movie. From what I know about it, I think, yes, we would say it's creative nonfiction.
Okay.
And then some other ones on here. We have In Cold Blood by Truman Capote, Wild, Preston the Madman. These are all, notice these are all books. Some of them have been turned into movies. We also mentioned Netflix shows, podcasts, all that good stuff. So as you are filling out that last part on your checkpoint, you can think of as many as you can come up with there. All right. So as we kind of wrap up here, because we are just about out of time, if you've been following along today, you should have this entire first part, this What is Creative Nonfiction Station, you should have this completed on your checkpoint. Now, if you weren't able to type or use your computer, like I said, that is totally a-okay. The class recording will be up on YouTube, and I will also be in the Summit Lab this afternoon. The way to get to that is just use the same link you used to get to this class. And between 1 and 3 o'clock this afternoon, myself and all the other teachers will be available at that link if you have questions about anything or so on and so forth. Okay. So really good job today. When we meet again on Tuesday, we'll talk about the second station on that checkpoint. Okay. Between now and then, let's make sure we have that first station on the checkpoint completed. All right. So if you were following along, you should be good. If you missed a little bit of it, or if you're able to type, you can check out the YouTube recording or come see me in the lab. And as always, if you have questions, you can shoot me an email or anything like that. Okay. Questions about anything before we go? Yeah. All right. A really good job. Thank you all for sharing. Thank you, Ms. Cat, for joining us. And have an excellent weekend. Stay safe. And I will see you all on Tuesday.
Bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Yeah.